Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're exploring Chris Bailey's book, How to Calm Your Mind. And we're going to kind of flip this idea that productivity has to equal busyness on its head.
Yeah, Bailey really pushes back against that widespread accomplishment mindset. That idea that we need to constantly be striving for more achievements, more stimulation. He argues that it actually leads to chronic stress and can really work against us.
So it's kind of like we're running on this treadmill thinking we're making progress, but we're actually just getting more and more anxious.
Precisely. Bailey actually uses his own personal experience to illustrate this point. He talks about having a full-blown panic attack on stage during a presentation.
Wow, that's intense. What do you think brought him to that point?
He attributes it to years of really pushing himself to the limit, constantly chasing productivity. And this experience really forced him to examine his relationship with calm and how it can actually contribute to genuine effectiveness.
It sounds like he's not just saying to add some meditation to our to-do list, but it's more of a fundamental shift in perspective.
Definitely. He defines calm as the opposite of anxiety, and he sees it as a continuum. So cultivating calm is about moving away from that inner turmoil and creating a more spacious mental environment.
I see how that could be beneficial, but how does he actually tie this idea of calm to productivity?
Bailey emphasizes how chronic stress really floods our systems with these stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. It puts us in that constant fight or flight mode. And that can actually shrink our attentional space, our ability to focus and think clearly.
So we're actually less effective when we're stressed out and on edge all the time. It's kind of counterintuitive, right? Because our culture really seems to prize busyness.
It really is. Bailey also points to this often overlooked role of what he calls superstimuli in sort of making this anxiety worse and shrinking that attentional space even further.
Superstimuli. What are those?
Well, think about things like social media, news feeds, online shopping, anything that's really designed to grab your attention constantly and trigger those dopamine releases. They basically hijack our brain's reward system and make us crave more and more stimulation.
So it's like we get stuck in this loop, always chasing that next dopamine hit, but never really feeling satisfied. Does that make sense?
Exactly. It's a really great analogy. And Bailey argues that this pursuit of novelty and stimulation driven by dopamine can actually make us less content over time.
It's almost like we're on a treadmill running faster and faster, but never really going anywhere.
That's a really powerful image. So if this constant stimulation is actually working against us, how do we break free from this, what Bailey calls the dopamine trap?
What does he suggest?
He proposes this really intriguing strategy he calls a stimulation fast.
A stimulation fast. I have to say that sounds a little daunting in today's world.
It definitely takes commitment, but essentially it's a period of time, usually Bailey recommends about a month, where you really significantly reduce your exposure to those superstimuli.
So that means like limiting social media, news, online shopping.
Yeah.
Basically a really intense digital detox. Did he find it helpful?
He describes these really significant improvements in his own anxiety levels and focus and just his overall sense of calm during his own stimulation fast. The idea is to give your brain a chance to sort of reset and recalibrate.
It makes sense, right? Stepping away from that constant barrage of information could create more space for clarity and intention. So what happens when we re-engage with the world after the fast? Do we just fall right back into old patterns?
That's a great question. Bailey emphasizes that this withdrawal from superstimuli can lead to a renewed appreciation for the things that actually matter. He found he had more energy and time for things like creative pursuits, deeper conversations, connecting with nature.
So it's not about becoming a hermit or rejecting technology altogether, but it's more about reclaiming our attention and directing it towards things that are more nourishing.
Precisely. It's about shifting our focus away from that shallow end of the dopamine pool toward those deeper waters of genuine engagement and meaning.
I'm starting to see how this ties back to the idea of calm leading to greater productivity. But a month-long digital detox might sound pretty overwhelming to some people. Does he offer any smaller steps that we can take to incorporate these ideas into our daily lives?
Definitely. One key concept he introduces is the idea of becoming aware of your stimulation height.
Stimulation height, what is that?
Imagine like a scale where activities are ranked based on how much dopamine they trigger. So things like social media and video games would be at the top, while things like reading a physical book or spending time in nature would be lower down.
Okay, so the goal is to be more conscious of where our activities fall on that scale and make intentional choices to lower our overall stimulation height.
Exactly. By reducing our exposure to those high dopamine activities, we can create a calmer, more balanced mental state.
So instead of scrolling through social media during every break, Maybe I choose to take a walk or chat with a coworker.
Exactly. And you might be surprised by how much more energized and focused you feel just by making those small shifts.
This is making a lot of sense. So by being mindful of our stimulation height, we can actually enhance our enjoyment of those high dopamine activities when we choose to engage in them.
Absolutely. By reducing our overall exposure to those superstimuli, we essentially reset our dopamine tolerance. That means when we do indulge in a video game or browse social media, it feels more novel and pleasurable because our brains aren't already overloaded.
Interesting. So it's about cultivating a more mindful relationship with stimulation instead of constantly chasing that next dopamine hit.
Yes, and Bailey really stresses how this shift in perspective goes beyond just reducing stress. It's about fundamentally changing how we approach productivity and fulfillment in our lives.
I'm excited to learn more about his specific strategies for cultivating calm. But first, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll explore some of Bailey's practical tips for incorporating these ideas into our everyday lives.
All right, I'm ready to get into those practical strategies. What are some of the things Bailey recommends for bringing more calm into our lives? Well, one of the core practices he talks about is embracing what he calls analog activities.
Analog activities.
Yeah.
Okay, what does he mean by that?
He's talking about activities that exist outside of the digital realm. Think like reading physical books, playing board games, spending time in nature, having face-to-face conversations.
So swapping screen time for more real-world experiences, it sounds nice in theory, but is it really that simple?
Bailey argues that the analog world kind of inherently has this slower, more deliberate pace that allows us to really absorb experiences and create those more lasting memories. He's not saying to abandon technology altogether, but it's about finding that balance.
I can see how disconnecting from the digital world and immersing ourselves in our physical surroundings could be grounding.
Exactly. These analog activities naturally lower our stimulation height. They offer a break from those constant dopamine surges that we get from the digital world.
So it's like hitting the reset button on our overstimulated brains.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of using a digital to-do list, maybe we try pen and paper. Instead of connecting with friends online, we prioritize in-person meetups.
Exactly. It's about rediscovering the benefits of those tangible experiences. And Bailey goes beyond just analog activities. He also talks about practices like meditation.
Meditation.
Yeah.
It's become really popular, but I've always felt a little intimidated by it. Do you need years of training to get any real benefit from it?
Bailey assures us that that's not the case at all. He really emphasizes the simplicity and accessibility of meditation. You can start small, even with just a few minutes each day.
So no need to become a Zen master overnight.
Not at all. The key is consistency. Just focus on your breath. Notice your thoughts and emotions without judgment.
What's the main benefit? Is it just about relaxation?
It's about developing this sense of awareness and control over your mental state. When we create that space between ourselves and our thoughts, we become less reactive to stress and anxiety.
That's interesting. So we're kind of building that mental muscle for calm. Does Bailey talk about any other everyday habits that could be impacting our well-being?
He does. He offers some interesting insights on caffeine and anxiety.
Caffeine. Now you're talking about my morning coffee.
He acknowledges that caffeine gives us that temporary energy boost, but he also cautions us about the potential downsides.
I can relate to that. I definitely get those afternoon energy crashes, and sometimes it messes with my sleep.
Exactly. Bailey highlights how caffeine can disrupt our sleep, make us more anxious, and contribute to those energy slumps. He suggests something he calls a caffeine reset.
A caffeine reset. Tell me more.
It basically involves significantly reducing or even eliminating your caffeine intake for a while so your body can recalibrate its tolerance and you can rediscover your natural energy rhythms.
Okay, so it's about breaking that cycle of dependence. Did he find it helpful?
He reported feeling more energetic, sleeping better, and noticing a significant reduction in his anxiety levels. It's worth experimenting to see how your body responds.
This is making me rethink my coffee habit. Did he talk about any other substances that could affect our ability to find calm?
He goes into the phenomenon of hangxiety.
Hangxiety. I know that feeling all too well. It's that anxiety and unease that can hit after a night of drinking.
That's it. Bailey explains how alcohol, while it might feel relaxing initially, can actually disrupt our brain chemistry and lead to increased anxiety in the hours or even days after we drink.
So we drink to relax, but then end up feeling more anxious. It's a vicious cycle.
Exactly. He encourages us to consider the potential long-term impacts of alcohol on our mental well-being and make more conscious choices.
So it's about recognizing those patterns in our lives that might be preventing us from feeling calm.
Absolutely. And Bailey also reminds us about the importance of movement and social connection for our overall well-being.
I agree. Those are essential. Does he offer any suggestions in these areas?
He really emphasizes finding forms of movement that you enjoy and that fit into your lifestyle. It's not about forcing yourself to do grueling workouts, but maybe explore different activities like dancing, hiking, swimming, or even just taking a walk in nature.
It's about finding that joy in movement. What about social connection?
He reminds us that we're social creatures by nature, and we need those meaningful interactions. He encourages us to prioritize in-person connection, whether that's spending time with loved ones, joining a club or group activity, or just striking up a conversation with someone new.
It's so easy to neglect those face-to-face interactions in our increasingly digital world.
For sure, nurturing those real-world connections can give us that sense of belonging, support, and purpose, which can all contribute to our overall sense of calm.
This has been so insightful. Bailey's framework for cultivating calm is so comprehensive and practical. It's not just about relaxation techniques, but about making real changes to our thinking and habits.
Right. He's giving us the tools to reclaim our mental space and create a life that's both productive and fulfilling.
I'm looking forward to hearing your final thoughts on the book. What's the key takeaway for our listeners? This has really helped me reframe how I think about all of this. What would you say is the most important thing Bailey wants us to take away from his book?
Bailey's core message is that calm isn't some sort of luxury. It's not something we can only afford once we've accomplished everything else. It's actually the foundation for a truly productive and fulfilling life.
It's like he's turning that whole idea of I'll relax once I'm successful on its head.
Absolutely. He makes this compelling argument that prioritizing calm can actually unlock these new levels of focus, creative thinking, and effectiveness in every area of our lives.
He's given us so much to think about. From that stimulation fast, to embracing analog activities, to rethinking our relationship with things like caffeine and alcohol. Where do we even begin?
And he reminds us that cultivating calm is an ongoing practice. It's not about finding that one magic solution. It's about continuous effort, experimentation, and figuring out what works best for each of us.
I appreciate that focus on individual needs. What are your final thoughts for our listeners as they start exploring this path toward greater calm?
One question Bailey poses that I find really thought-provoking is this. What are some subtle sources of stress in your life that you might not even be aware of?
That's a good point. We can become so used to certain levels of stress and busyness that we don't even realize how much they're affecting us.
Exactly. By becoming more aware of those hidden stressors, we can start making choices that support our well-being.
I feel like we've just scratched the surface of this topic, but this deep dive into how to calm your mind has been incredibly valuable.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. The key takeaway here is that prioritizing calm is an investment. It's an investment in a better, more productive, and ultimately more fulfilling life.
Well said. Before we wrap up, let's try to distill some of Bailey's key takeaways into maybe 10 concise points that our listeners can remember.
Okay, great idea. So here are 10 insights from how to calm your mind. First, we have the accomplishment mindset. This is that idea that the constant pursuit of more can actually lead to chronic stress and diminishing returns. Then there's the dopamine trap, superstimuli, like those we talked about earlier, hijack our brain's reward system and keep us craving more and more novelty and stimulation, which can end up working against our sense of calm. Next is stimulation height. Bailey encourages us to become aware of where our activities fall on the stimulation scale and to intentionally choose activities that help us lower our overall stimulation. Then we have the stimulation fast. This can be a powerful way to reset our dopamine tolerance and reclaim our sense of calm. Number 5 is analog alternatives. Bailey reminds us of the benefits of engaging in those activities that exist outside the digital realm. Meditation practice, even just a few minutes each day, can help us develop awareness of our thoughts and emotions and respond to stress with more resilience. Number 7 is caffeine reassessment. We might want to consider how much caffeine we're consuming and experiment with reducing or eliminating it to see how it affects our energy levels and anxiety. Then there's anxiety awareness. It's important to understand the connection between alcohol and anxiety and how it can impact our well-being. Movement for well-being. Finding forms of movement we truly enjoy and incorporating them into our routine can do wonders for reducing stress, elevating our mood, and just feeling better overall. And finally, number 10 is nurturing connections. Prioritizing real-world connections and making time for face-to-face interaction can be incredibly beneficial for our overall sense of calm and fulfillment.
That's a great list to reflect on. I know I'm going to be thinking about these ideas for a long time. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the power of calm.
Remember, cultivating calm is a journey. It's an ongoing process. So stay curious, stay present, and keep exploring those practices that nurture your well-being.